Hey everyone, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to accelerate their business and grow their team. I'm here with Sean. Sean, please introduce yourself.
Well, hey, Ben, this is Sean Farrell. I am the CEO of Quality Data Systems, or QDS, here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We provide automation technology primarily to financial institutions, so things like ATMs and other cash automation devices. And we operate in about 14 states, from Pennsylvania to Miami to Louisiana. And we've experienced a lot of growth over the last 7 or so years, but have been in business for 40, and look forward to having a great conversation today.
Cool. Awesome. Excited to have you. What tech trends significantly impacted you or your industry, and how did your company respond, or how are you guys responding?
I think as an automation company, I get, I probably get 200 cold emails a week on all the different sales products. So, I think filtering through the right products and technology in a stack, we have a really good proposal system that has allowed us to be very nimble. And a core value for us is responsiveness. So, how do we set up to use technology, not just for technology's sake, but how does that help us, be more responsive, improve the customer experience? We still have a lot of manual processes that we're working to leverage technology for. We're looking to invest in a new ERP system here coming up because we just have many disparate systems that don't give us the data we need and don't have a main center of truth. So I think that'll be a big focus of ours in 2025. And obviously the certainly the wave of the times of, like, how do we use AI and AI for good? And so we do a lot of tech support, and I think about HR functions. So how could we create kind of our own private GPT that we would feed it all the data and it would be able to respond back to us? Our ways that we're really looking to leverage technology. We've been an Office 365 shop for a while. We've gone to cloud infrastructure. So we just had a huge hurricane roll through here at the time we're recording this. Hurricane Helene has done a ton of damage here in the Carolinas. And so the ability for us to, functionally have an office shut down, which we were blessed not to have to. But I mean, if our office is closed, essentially we can continue operations because we've put together the right technology pieces to function from essentially anywhere. So that has really helped us out a lot in the near term.
Yeah, that's great. And as a software cloud company CEO, you're talking my language, so that's great. And we've walked several people through the ERP transition, so that's really awesome. What if you really had to center around three technology innovations that you're betting on to drive your business growth? What would those three technology innovations be?
I mean, I think AI has to be one of them, and it's in our face at what feels like every 30 minutes these days. But um, there is so much power in data and the ability to, like, shortcut things. So I am not a big fan of AI can replace human. I am a big fan of AI can enhance human and allow them to, focus. So again, I ran our sales organization up until this year. So thinking about how to optimize messaging, and not that I don't want AI emailing people, but I think things like doing research, providing relevancy will only enhance what a sales rep can do. So empowering people. So I think AI has got to be one. Anything we can do efficiency wise with data and dashboards. As a company our size, which is about 120 people, roughly 40 million in revenue, we don't have a lot of great data dashboards today. So I think with data comes clarity. And as we have different departments with different goals, I think that is going to continue to drive us where visibility and clarity are going to get us results. So I would say maybe we're behind in that, but as people looking at innovation, I think having correct data, moving more towards leading trends with data, and that will really paint a picture of success for our departments, will be valuable. And then third, I mean, I think anything we can do to optimize workflow and productivity. So leveraging cloud solutions for a work from anywhere, enhancing the mobile experience. So we have over half of our company that is in the field service organization. So how do we put more power at their fingertips to do from their mobile device and not have to rely on a laptop or, other devices? So I think really how do we continue to enhance mobile with maybe an application, or again, a new ERP that can put more at their fingertips, from photographs to checklists, and all those things that will make them more effective and efficient are probably going to drive us forward.
Yeah, awesome. Well, what are the most significant gaps between your digital ambitions and the realities of today?
I think resources is a reality, right? Like at my level, there are things that are nice to have and that you would like to have, but we're still relatively lean. We don't have a lot of people just sitting around looking for something to do. So, to be able to implement something new, change management and process, it takes resources, it takes experts, even partnering with partners like yourself, it still takes some internal resources to spin these things up. So I would say that is probably one of our biggest inhibitors, which I'm sure is not unique, is just, hey, who can I pull a fraction of their time to move us forward when they're, pretty well fully plated now? And how important is this project that I can pull them to, make the change that 6 months from now, we're going to be 50% more efficient in that department. But today I don't have the bandwidth to yank somebody out for 6 months to run the project. So that's
Yeah.
probably our biggest inhibitor, is we just don't have a lot of people bandwidth available to implement new things.
Yeah, we've been toying around with this idea of capacity. Capability is no longer something that's like a stricken word. So it's not that I'm not capable to do something; it's that I don't have the capacity. And then when we think about, okay, well, capacity is a function of leadership, right? So it doesn't give capability, gives leadership the out, right? Like, well, my team's just not capable. Capacity is this shared responsibility. Because if I say, well, why don't you have the capacity to help us move, like working on the business versus in the business? A lot of times what will come up in that conversation is the idea of, well, I don't like, what I'm really saying is that I need some new skills. If I had some new skills, I could do more faster, and then I'd create capacity. And so we've been talking a little bit about how do we create the capacity to do the things we know we should do. Um, and in that, there might be some self training. And then I just read this book, The One Thing. And in that, he talks really about what is the one thing that you can do to create more capacity in, future cycles. And then you focus on that, kind of like a debt snowball, strategy. But that's really cool that you're right at the forefront of that.
Yeah, I think any company has challenges with, maybe good or bad. A lot of the additional workload falls on your A players, right? So I may create total capacity, but I may only have a subset of my capacity that really has the talent and ability to take on new innovative type things. So it's a challenge for them to always get placed in kind of the special projects or things like that, and potentially lead a team and do some fractional doing work. And I think, personally for QDS, we have experienced a ton of growth. So I don't know that I have a bunch of leaders and or managers who are just leading and managing. They are probably, still holding on to some doing work. So that again becomes a difficult way to create capacity, is we don't have, 12 people that are just leading a team. They're leading a team, a small team, and still, doing kind of some player coach type stuff.
Yeah, yeah, understood. Well, what's the biggest challenge to maintaining a competitive edge in your industry?
I would say to make sure, and like, how is this going to impact the customer experience? So we can do a lot of things that makes the organization more efficient, that moves information around. But if we lose sight of how does the customer get impacted by this? So like we have a system today for tickets called Jira, which is,
Very
very,
familiar.
very ubiquitous platform. So by going to an automated ticketing system, there's a lot of tracking. You make sure things don't fall through the cracks, but sometimes you can lose the human element. So, as someone like us who is very focused on hand holding and delivering an exceptional customer experience, you really have to pay attention to that dial of, there's something like putting an AI chatbot on your website that could be very effective, but that may be one slight step to take away from dehumanization. And then what's the next step is how, today we have live bodies that answer the phone and take calls. And that if you introduce an AI to that, now you start to dehumanize that. So I think those are things you have to keep in mind. Is technology is great, and if that is moving the team forward so that they can still provide an amazing customer experience, that's the win-win. Can you drive efficiency and improvement, not to the detriment of your customer experience?
Right. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, this might help. How do you approach risk management then when implementing a cutting edge technology or just even a new process?
Yeah. uh, that is definitely something we've learned in the last year. So we just recently went through a SOC 2 type 2 process, which was new for us. That was the first attempt, which we did well, but there's a lot of things you begin to start to have to think through of just, are we going to have a committee that votes on new technology versus a new department being able to just say, hey, we found this cool tool, our department's going to implement it, and 2 years go by and like, how did we add 8 pieces of software that no one really knew about? We didn't have centralized controls, we didn't have centralized audit. So as fraud and the criminals continue to get more creative, taking an info secure, strong position is important. And that goes back to not just the tools you put in place. Like there's many great cybersecurity tools, but if you don't have the processes and structure and attitude about it, then as we know, you can have all the amazing tools in the world. All it takes is someone to click that nasty link in the email, and you're in a breach situation. So thankfully, we do not store a lot of PII. So when we look at our overall risk profile, we've done a good job of segmenting out. Like we just don't have a lot of golden family jewels that are, attackable, but we do have a lot of access to our clients' endpoints. So that goes back to security controls, what access to information, all of that being protected by multi-factor. So you really have to look at the scale of risk and what is a worst case scenario, and then also the likelihood, and is this a risk we're willing to tolerate because we feel good about our controls.
Yeah. Well, what advice can you share about connecting a technology roadmap to the overall business strategy? Like, how do you plan?
Yeah, I mean, good question. We are probably not unlike many. We typically go through strategic planning about now. So September, October tends to be strategic planning. A lot of it comes down from corporate strategic goals of, where do we feel like we can improve? Is there additional market share we can gain? What's holding us back? And that often leads to a conversation of, is it a people bandwidth issue? Do we need to make hires, or are the processes potentially sluggish or need refining? And there's potentially a way to invest in technology to solve that problem. Traditionally, we have, I'm going to say, somewhat made the mistake of, we have typically thrown people at problems. And now, as we have become much more bottom line focused through the growth, to me, that's really where that you marry that technology roadmap and go, what is available to help us achieve these key business objectives? How's that going to help deliver us the next round of revenue without having to add so much headcount, et cetera? Where do we feel like we're inefficient? The systems aren't talking, all of that. So I think you still have to start with overall business objectives and strategy, and then go to the kind of the whiteboard and go, what technology and where do we feel like we're technology deficient that could help solve those problems as a first step, as opposed to let's just throw people at it and every department needs another body and then we'll be there.
Yeah. So you come up with your strategic plan in Q4 for the following year. Uh, what process do you have to recalibrate against that? Do you recalibrate against it quarterly, or do you have some framework for that?
Yeah, so we have both an executive team and a senior leadership team. Typically meets somewhere between every 6 weeks and quarterly, depending on which group that is. So I think it's understanding, almost certainly on a quarterly basis, these were the assumptions we made going into the year, and this is what we thought was going to happen. How are we performing against those? Have any new surprises come up? Has the Fed raised rates or lowered rates? What is that doing to our customer base in financial institutions? Have any of our uh, goals needed to be shifted based on overall market dynamics? So I do think a quarterly cadence and kind of we don't have a formal report card, but kind of thinking through what's going well, what needs to be improved, and do we need to move the prioritization? So we may have 5 things that we wanted to do from a technology perspective, and they were ranked 1 to 5. Has 5 now come up to number 2 based on market conditions, or we had an employee exit, or we had an HR thing come up, so we really need to get this HR connection done. So I think priorities can always shift, even though the list may not.
Yeah. I've been hearing from a lot of CEOs that this annual planning is kind of, and no one was saying you're doing this, but I've just seen this trend for wanting to do time compression. In the software development world, time compression kind of comes with the bag of goods. Like we get scrums, and um, the investment is so high that time compression is just like always there. But in business planning, what I've been seeing is, I'm a big fan of OKRs, and you set your OKRs for the year, and you have your monthly or quarterly meetings to see how you're tracking against the OKRs. But what I've also found people doing is trying to say, well, what could we accomplish all of that in a quarter? Like, what could we validate about the quarter? And then from there, I'm trying to see if my team can get weekly singular goals. Like, what's the one thing this week? Aside from, yeah, I have to talk to the customer and there's work, totally get that. But what's the one thing that I'm going to do on the business this week that's either going to, make future cycles more efficient, or directly relates to that 90-day goal. So I'm just kind of playing with some ideas of taking that annual strategy and seeing if I can really focus on like what, and my EOS friends are also doing something very similar. Like in EOS, there's like a whole day of planning. So rather than a week once a year, they're doing a day every quarter. And so I find that fascinating, this kind of like concept of time compression and how to make the important urgent so that it does get done, aside from the regular minutia of business operations.
Yeah, and I actually really like that advice, because I think many of our, senior leaders, even middle managers, like they just get stuck in there's always a fire, right? And so we do a good job of like training and developing and talking about things that need to get done, but breaking it down to, all right, what's one thing you can do this week that's going to move the needle in the next month, the next quarter? I think there's some sound principle there, and I think that would help us. I mean, we talk a lot about calendar discipline, and you've got to calendar some time to actually get stuff done, as opposed to be in meetings or answering client phone calls all the time. So to me, that would be a great framework or discipline to wrap around that is, all right, if you've got one key thing to work on the business, like get that on the calendar, get it done. And that's going to make a huge impact over time. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, I totally stole that. So the
All the best ideas, right? We plagiarize.
yeah, I borrowed with pride. Um, yeah, I think there's like this idea of surfing chaos, right? The emails and the phone calls and the meetings, they kind of are the chaos of life, and we can just hang 10 on that stuff. And then really, then we get through a week, we feel like, well, I really didn't get anything done. But if there was an intention to do that one thing, it can also lead to a lot of satisfaction. Like, hey, I just launched mine for last week was that I needed to launch my performance review system. It went live yesterday. And so that was my one thing. I had to get everything just like, and so different people were helping me. But that was the goal for the week. Everybody was super clear that we're going to launch that. And then for this week, it's a specific campaign. And so different people are moving different parts of that goal, but everybody's super clear that that's going to be the thing. And I'm just observing not only that it's that we're all aligned, which is really awesome, but that it's also giving us something to celebrate. Like, yeah, we did that one thing. That was the thing we put in the water upstream, and we saw it come down into the ocean. So yeah, it's also giving us a little bit of morale boost to see that we can accomplish these bigger things.
And I think from a leadership development standpoint, if you find that as a leader, you're not getting that one thing done, that goes back to, how can I get my next person down to take 2 or 3 things off of my plate in a week, which is going to help them grow. And because I'm transparent, I'm not getting my one thing done. So becomes some kind of shared ownership, as you say, in that teamwork. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of new leaders, is they want to do everything. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, what can you trim or prune so that you can get the important stuff done. And by the way, that also grows the people that could step into your shoes next, whether that's a year away or 5 years away. How do you grow your people? And we're all about leaders creating more leaders, and that's one way to do it.
Yeah, so that brings this capacity discussion right to the surface, right? Like you didn't hit the one thing, like I needed you for that and you weren't there. Well, but I had all this other stuff. Okay, cool. Capacity now is the topic. And then, well, but they don't know how to do these things that I know how to do. And so this concept of SOPs all of a sudden becomes the one thing, right? Well, if you sat down and wrote it up, we some of my most senior technologists were doing architecture, and it seemed like architecture was this elusive thing that they could not train someone else to do. It was, it takes creativity and experience. Yes, it does take creativity experience when there's not an SOP for what does it mean to enter into a new technology system. And so when we broke that down, and that became the one thing, like to define architecture, what does it mean to do that? And then what we came down to, it was really simple. It was a set of research that needs to be completed and a set of drawings that need to be decided upon. And yeah, there's tons of work in those two things. So it may seem like oversimplifying, but when we broke down all the research that was required to be able to deliver an architecture, and then all the drawings that we could potentially choose from, then the creativity was just simply saying, well, that particular type of drawing is not appropriate for this system. Okay, we could take that out. But to kind of boil the ocean and see what the finite set of things that might need to be done are, and have that in an SOP, all of a sudden, like now architecture can be delegated. So like an SOP can be a phenomenal deliverable that creates capacity.
That has been one of our biggest keys to success. Just to pile on that topic, I think we've implemented or have documented about 1,100 SOPs the last 2 years, because we were in that situation of we had a ton of new people coming into the organization and we're trying to train, and a lot of this is coming out of people's brains, and it's like we got to document this stuff so it becomes a much faster learning cycle. And so that has been certainly transformative for us.
Cool. Well, what lessons have you learned from tech initiatives that failed to deliver expected value?
Trying to go back and think if we've had a failure. Um, we got 98% of the way doing a phone system migration, and right as we were getting ready to port numbers like that, like the whole UI kind of fell apart and what we were trying to do. So like we had to pull the plug on that at the last minute. So I mean, we probably wasted, a ton of manpower setting that up, et cetera. Um, I remember, and it's going back a long way, like we went down a wrong ERP path probably back 2007, 2008, and literally had bought it and was trying to implement it. And one of our main things is we typically have a master customer. So, if you know anything about banking, all right, so Bank of America, headquartered here in Charlotte, well, they have 10,000 locations. And so our typical contract is with the home office, and then all the other children kind of fall under one agreement. And the provider we had selected, which was primarily in the HVAC space, each individual location needed its own contract. And I was like, that's not going to work. So we had at the time probably spent 20 grand. We were trying to go live with the software, and when we had that training, it's like, well, what do you mean it works that way? So we have a much more rigorous selection process than we did 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's cool. Sounds like just like the discovery and just really getting all the get everything aligned, like what the needs actually are, super helpful. I've seen folks want to kind of build software and then give feedback and build software and give feedback, which the agile development cycle lends itself really well to, but it's super costly. Rather than like, hey, could we have some design up front, fully think it through, give a lot of, because the design is cheap to change. So a lot of times this cost of change is heavy, right? We need to find a way to make a better effort in the first iteration. How do you cultivate a culture of innovation and fluency in your organization?
I think the culture of innovation is easier than fluency for sure. I am a big believer in there's always a better way to do it. So I don't know if that goes back to the athletic background. I use the term often like we have an allergy to complacency. So to me, there's always like tweaks that can be made. What process is broken? How can we better implement? So I think culturally, people are willing to share what's broken and, always looking for better ways to do it, which fosters that culture of innovation. Fluency is tough because I think that goes back to change management, and it's hard because people have been doing something for a year, 5 years, 10 years the same way, and now you introduce this fantastic new way to do it with a new software piece, and they have trouble. So it goes back to implementation, training. We went to a dedicated trainer for our field service force about 2 years ago. So we knew that there was consistency in the experience. We were covering the right information versus kind of ad hoc pulling people in to do training. So I think something similar would apply as you start to look at change management, whether it be a new software product, new ERP, like really investing in the onboarding, training, and ongoing training, and making sure like we're going to probably move to more required fields because we found data can get very dirty because some people use all caps, some people don't use caps, some people spell it out, some people use the abbreviation. So those are things when you think about fluency, having SOPs, standards, required fields are things that will make and keep the data clean that we are thinking through as we head into this new ERP implementation.
Cool. Well, can you share an experience or just maybe give some advice on what you would tell peers beginning their digital transformation, or maybe somebody just starting their career?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to probably the foundational principles of it, like how is communication working today? So if you are not digital, you may have a lot of, paper flying around. You may have processes that take a while. So just like how do you give people quick access to information across a platform? Is there a more immediate way to communicate? Things like Teams and Slack and all of these messaging things. Communication to me is a foundational principle of successful business, and that's one of our goals is to be the best communicators in our industry. Second is access to information. So if you're not digital, you may have only a small subset of people that get a certain set of reports on some given time frame versus as you look at that digital transformation journey, moving more towards real-time data, lagging and leading indicators, are we on target to hit our goals? That's going to drive the profitability we need. And I have certainly found that most employees want to be successful. They want to do a good job. But if they don't understand what winning looks like and how they impact the overall success, that can lead to disengagement, right? They can start to feel like a cog in the wheel if they don't understand what is my purpose and how do I contribute to the overall success. So I think availability of data and access and clarity are key. And then speed. I mean, technology is typically going to bring you speed. So not having to type up a proposal in a Word document and edit it and da 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 da, and it may take you a week to 30 days, depending on your industry, versus like, wow, we have a templated proposal. It takes me 30 seconds to adjust the components, and now I can be more responsive. So I think speed and the way you can move to the customer would probably be the third important topic of digital transformation. So those would be like take some steps, look at your processes, what takes the longest, and is there a way to move that into a digital world that's going to make it faster, better, etc.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of times, um, as leaders, we need to at least know the outcomes we're looking for before we go engage experts. Before we start delegating, right? We're going to delegate a piece of our business off to somebody. And so we need to at least know what we're looking for, because it's often too easy to delegate and just say, like, show me stuff. And then when I see what I like, I'll know. Um, and so like being super clear on what we're expecting and what would actually help the business. And um, you end up explaining the business many times and not getting fatigue on that. Like, make sure people understand the context and what you're really targeting. Because I know like I used to kind of do this with finance in a way. Like I don't know how to tell you to do what I want. I just know when you show it to me, it'll find out. And so putting the time in to really understand what I want in that area was like super helpful. Um, so then when I am working with experts, they can say, well, sure, like here's that, but and there's this other stuff. And I was able to get to the point a lot quicker.
And I'll give one example just because we were talking about it before we recorded here, but project management is a big part of our business. It was typically taking our project managers maybe upwards of 45 minutes to recap a project call. So rather than coming at it from, oh, like we got to figure out how to do this AI thing, it was, well, hey, I see a lot of people are using AI note takers. It seems like that would really cut down on the amount of time. Why don't we pilot that? And sure enough, by using an AI note taker, that summary, that 45 minutes, and these are people that are running anywhere from 10 to 15 projects at a time. So you can multiply, went from 45 minutes to 5 minutes to summarize the transcript, clean it up, and get it out to clients. And it's like, there's an actual business impact to the technology as opposed to, I see NVIDIA stock is doing well, we should invest in AI. So again, coming at it from what is a cumbersome process and is there a technology that can solve for that? And let's test it and boom, off you go.
Well, I love to ask some questions here. The podcast is a little bit like an NCIS episode, right? I ask similar questions to all my guests. What was your first job? Like, how did you make your first dollar? For me, it was I was 13 years old and I had a paper route, but what was it for you?
I think my first job was actually after college, and I had the opportunity to be a professional baseball player. So, was had the privilege of being drafted by the Oakland A's and played one season before I messed up my shoulder and made a robust $700 a month as a minor league baseball player.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome. Well, then this question may chime in here. So, what toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career wise today?
So I did grow up playing sports. So I think I had a particular love for baseball and football. And when I transitioned into the business world, I really fell in love with sales, and I am an extremely competitive person. So that was a really good way for me to kind of get those competitive juices out. I really enjoyed winning. And certainly as I've grown in my career, it has been much more about helping people and helping clients be successful. So a lot of that comes back from the athletic background of, especially in baseball, you fail often. And so learning from a lot of things and how to adjust and make adjustments has been a key to success.
Awesome. Well, what was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Ooh, I always enjoyed math and I also majored in psychology. So I always enjoyed learning like kind of how people are the way they are and how they think. So that was very engaging. Um, I'm not much of a history guy, so kind of that like social studies and history, and I can tell you when the War of 1812 was, but I probably can't tell you what we were fighting over at that
Yeah.
given time. So history and a lot of just like the dry kind of sociological stuff is probably my least favorite.
Yeah. I love the intersection between psychology and math. Like if I could make people make more sense, then it would be good for me. I like that.
Yeah, and I mean, just all the brain chemicals and whatnot is just to me, it's fascinating. As we are in an area where mental health is certainly very front of mind for a lot of people, it's just very interesting to understand how all those things work.
Yeah, totally. Well, what quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
Uh, so one of my favorites, I believe it's J.J. Watt, and it's success is not owned, it's leased, and the rent is due every day. So to me, that goes back to we got to figure out how to add value every day. How are we making impact? And if we were successful yesterday, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be successful today.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, making every day count. Um, yeah, love that. That's great. What was the greatest invention or discovery in your view in the past 300 years?
Past 300 years. I mean, I would think it would have to be, and I hope electricity was in the last 300 years, but I
Yeah, it
think
was.
I mean, if you think about all the things that draw power and the progression of how that led to even like Wi-Fi internet that most of us can't deal without, I mean, it seems like electricity and power has been probably maybe the most transformative invention in the last 300 years, if I had to go with one.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go on a guy's camping trip. We set an intention to go climb a 14er in
Woo.
Colorado, and um, and I was the guy that had the Delta 2 Max, which is like a big exterior battery. Got an alternate, basically I came prepared with a dual battery system in my Tacoma that so I could charge everybody's devices, and they gave me a ton of crap for it at the beginning. But then about halfway through the trip, when they're FaceTiming with their wives and keeping tabs on work things, they're like, yeah, this is all right. Staying where there's some place with electricity is not that bad.
Wisdom and foresight, correct?
Right, exactly. One guy at one point woke up from a night of restless sleep and was like, and I'm sleeping on the ground and I own an RV. Like, what am I doing here? Right.
Touche.
Bunch of CEOs going on a rugged camping trip. It was fun. Well, if people liked what you had to share today, how should they connect with you?
Yeah, so I love connecting on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great spot to find me. Again, Sean Farrell, CEO of QDS. Our website is www.qualitydatasystems.com. And we also have a big charitable, we believe in being a force for good. And so we also have a 501(c)(3) called Lionheart Charities. So we want to be a great business so that we can impact the communities in which we serve. So certainly, if you're interested in helping on that front as well, would love to connect and see how we can partner together to make the world a better place.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about the mission of Lionheart Charities.
It started very broad. So we, you know, making sure we could take care of employees. It is very local focused. We certainly there are plenty of other countries in the world that have issues we're solving. We found we did not have to look very far to come up with problems to solve. So, we have had a big focus on first responders, veteran care. We do a lot with like breast cancer and those components. Um, and then really have a heart for those serving in the community. So we've got a new partnership with Least of These Carolinas that provides support for foster care, families, and children. So if you are doing good work in the community, we want to come support that. And that's kind of part of our purpose statement here, which is our purpose at QDS is to create a flourishing dynamic between company, employee, customer, and the community we serve through the love of Jesus. So that's one way
Awesome.
we execute on that.
Awesome. Well, appreciate that. And yeah, it was great to have you on the podcast today. I look forward to hearing where this mission takes you.
Appreciate you having me on, Ben. Look forward to it.
Awesome.